Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, we're going to tell you about a Trojan that targets your PC and your phone to drain your bank account, a powerful zero-day exploit against your smart TV, and a new way to spoof GPS, plus a big batch of your questions and so much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 88 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. This episode was live on December 13th, 2012, and this episode is brought to you by GoDaddy.com. We'll tell you more about them as the show goes on, and the live stream is powered by the incredible ScaleEngine.com. Go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, man. Welcome to episode 88.
88 episodes.
I know, that's crazy. And now as we're approaching the holidays, we were just chatting on the pre-show on the live stream that we might even be seeing Alan from a different location in a future TechSNAP. But we don't know yet, but we'll see.
Well, basically, we decided that there will always be TechSNAP.
There will be no holiday break, though. We just might be recording it from different locations in the next couple of weeks, but we'll stay tuned and we'll figure all that out as we go. Now, Alan, guess what, Alan?
What's that?
Big show today. We got a couple of our first story is probably the biggest story that we have in the doc this week. Should we start with that and jump right in?
Sure.
All right. What is it, sir?
So it's the banking malware Trojan we've talked about a bit before. Basically, some security companies have done an analysis and figured out that it managed to steal approximately 36 million euros. Which is quite a bit of money. If I just do my random currency conversion in my head, it's about 50 million US dollars.
Your head kind of sounds like a keyboard.
Yeah. Basically, they managed to steal about 50 million US dollars from 30,000 different customers spread across 30 different banks in Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, and Italy. And it's a rather sophisticated attack that involved a number of different steps. So seeing how successful it was makes you wonder, just how in-depth these attacks are going to start getting. But basically, the Trojan infected the victim's PC and mobile phone and intercepts their attempts to interact with their bank and steals their money. So basically, we've talked a bit before about the Zeus Trojan.
Okay.
And this is basically a modified version of that that's even more insidious.
Oh, good.
But basically, the victims are tricked into infecting their mobile phone as well by their PC claiming that, you need to upgrade this encryption software on your phone in order to use your online banking or whatever, and so on. Which mostly targets the fact that your average user doesn't actually know how the internet and online banking works or how the two-factor authentication actually works.
I like how they'll give the mobile user options. Are you an Android user? Click here. A BlackBerry user? Click here.
Right. We'll get into the details in just a minute here. But yeah, there was mobile Trojans for both the BlackBerry and Android devices. But the mobile infection was key to the success of this Trojan because banks are using two-factor authentication, right? When you try to transfer a large amount of money, they send you an SMS message with a transaction authentication number, which is basically just it's a few digits, and you type it in to confirm that it's actually you trying to make this transaction.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So that if someone steals your online banking username and password with like a keylogger or something, they can't steal your money because you get a message to your cell phone saying, hey, did you authorize this?
Right.
And you need that number to complete the transaction. But in this case, they're infecting your phone so that you don't get that message. Your phone does, and your phone sends it back and allows them to steal your money. So this allows the attackers to transfer money out of the victim's account without alerting the victim or the bank, because the bank, says, oh, this might be fraud, so we send the SMS message, and the user confirmed it, so it must not be fraud. And the Trojan would basically initiate transfers ranging from 500 to 250,000 euros from the source account to various accounts around Europe. And then those funds could be withdrawn by mules out of bank machines or whatever and eventually delivered to the people behind the attack. So the Zeus Trojan is known for modifying the pages returned by your online banking to show the expected account balance in transactions, right? So when you log into your online banking, you usually have an idea of how much money you think should be in your bank account, right? And you know what transactions you're supposed to see there.
Yeah, good idea.
So older attacks like this, when they steal your money, you would notice next time you log in, it's like, oh, all my money's gone, right?
Yeah.
And then, the next phase was having it so that it would keep returning the same page all the time. So you would just see no new transactions, but you wouldn't. So for at least a couple of days, you wouldn't realize something was wrong until you're like, hey, I know new transactions happen. How come they're not showing up?
Right.
So what this one does is it knows what your balance was before they stole your money. And basically, they delete the line that shows them stealing your money and adjust the balance sent from your bank to include the money that's actually gone. So you see your entire transaction register, and the balance is right all as it keeps getting updated. So even though $5,000 is missing from your account, it's not missing from your balance on the page. Your bank shows it missing, but the Trojan on your computer is modifying the page before you see it so that it's still there. And if you want to know a little bit more about that, there's a previous episode we did on man-in-the-browser attacks and how those work.
Oh, yes.
But to detail this particular attack, we can walk through all the steps that were required for it to work. So the first step was the victim getting their PC infected. This usually resulted from either going to a malicious site accidentally or whatever, being tricked into clicking a link from a phishing scam or a social media attack. Someone sends you a Twitter message or an MSN message or something, right? We've seen when people's computers get infected, the best way to spread the infection is to use their credentials to send a message to their friends.
Sure.
Right? You either email everybody in their email address book, or you send messages to all their MSN contacts or their Facebook contacts or whatever. And because those people know that person that they're getting the message from, they're more likely to trust it and click the link.
That's kind of like what the whole Facebook like system is based on.
Yeah. And so the victim then visits their regular online banking website and logs into their account to make a transaction, like they normally would, except for their computer's infected with the Trojan, and the Trojan is now stealing their information as they're doing this. So the Trojan steals their login and password and then modifies the code on their bank's page to prompt the user for their mobile phone number and what operating system. So you log into your bank, and instead of seeing your regular bank welcome screen or the your account balance or whatever, you see a screen saying, "Hey, we need your mobile phone and what operating system you have for our security, whatever." And so people enter their mobile phone number and what operating system they have, and then that collected information is sent back to the attacker's command and control server instead of to the bank, right? And then the user logs in and they see their regular banking and they do their thing. So then the attacker then sends a text message from their server to the victim's phone saying, hey, click here to download your upgraded encryption software from your bank or whatever. And it would link to the right one for their operating system because we just asked them for that. And instead of getting an encryption upgrade to support online banking for your phone, you instead got Zipmo or Zeus in the mobile, right? Because Zeus was a man-in-the-browser attack, and so when they developed a mobile version of it, they called it Zeus in the mobile.
Oh, that's nice. That's clever.
Yes. So then now your mobile device is infected as well, disguised as an upgrade to your online banking. So now each time the victim logs into their online banking, the Trojan initiates a transfer of money out of the victim's account using the victim's real online banking credentials. The bank recognizes, hey, this is a large transaction. It seems out of character. There's a high risk of fraud here. So they delay the transaction and send the user a request to complete two-factor authentication. Basically send them an SMS message with this TAN saying, you have to enter this TAN to confirm the transaction or it won't happen. So the TAN SMS is intercepted by the Trojan on your phone. Instead of you seeing the text message, your phone intercepts it. The Trojan then sends the TAN number back to the command and control server, and the victim never knows they even got a text message from their bank. Then the JavaScript that was injected into the online banking page on your PC by the Trojan calls the CNC server and gets that TAN number and types it in and authorizes the transfer of money from your account to the attackers, one of the accounts the attacker is using to filter the money eventually to them. And now the Eurograbber attack is complete, and they've siphoned money out of your account, even despite the bank's two-factor authentication system.
Jeez. Are we seeing the creation of like banking system framework kits, scamming kits that people can just take, and then they'll just put in the correct bank URLs and the correct logos and names, and they can just deploy it?
I think these attacks are a little more specific because you have to replicate the HTML of the banking page in order to like delete rows out of the tables and stuff.
Good. So
it probably means the attacker has to do a little bit of work at each of the banks, but they don't even have to have an account at each. If the Trojan lets them steal the username and password for new bank number 7 or whatever, or the 31st bank on their list, then they can't do the TAN attack yet. But they can log in as that victim and get all the HTML of what the page is supposed to look like at that bank and construct their fake version of that bank. So
this is almost exactly like the one we covered back in the Man in the Browser episode.
Yeah, basically is that, except for they've extended it to make up for the fact that the banks have started using these SMS messages to make sure that the transactions are authorized by the user. And so they use a Trojan on your phone to intercept that.
Yeah,
now, if you remember, we saw a similar attack as this in Australia a couple months back. And remember what they did was they called up the guy's cell phone company and had his phone number transferred to a burner phone, right? So they hijacked his phone number by just pretending to be him calling up his phone company, and the phone company didn't do enough checking, like asking the guy for information.
Right.
Like, even the balance of your last bill or something to prove that you're the owner of that account. But anyway, so they basically ported the guy's cell phone number to a different phone so that when the bank sent the TAN SMS, the attackers would have it. And they managed to steal a very large sum of money from one person. That attack is much harder to do against a large number of people. So in this case, they were just infecting people's phones with the Trojan.
It's the 1-2 combo. Yeah. Right, it's the combo approach that really you think you're safe. You're like, well, even if they got junk on my computer, I got that 2-factor, and that 2-factor is gonna save me. That 2-factor.
But really, here a lot of it was clever social engineering, convincing the user to hand over information about their phone, or convince the user that this text message they got from some random number is from their bank and that they should install the software. Because if they understood how the 2-factor was working and the bank was only ever going to send a number, you don't need encryption software on your phone or something, right? And so a lot of it comes down to the users following better stuff.
Boy, hasn't that always been the case, though, Alan? Hasn't that always been the case? And look where we still are. It's 2012, almost the end of 2012, and we're no better off than we were back in 1985 when it comes to that regard. Any other thoughts on that one?
Just a little bit. But basically, this attack highlights the need for better phishing prevention, especially by financial institutions, right? Because that's the ones that are being the most targeted. So we would really like to see financial institutions having better email policy, especially setting up SPF records and cryptographically signing all the legit emails that they ever send.
Yeah.
So even if you're a bank that, say, never sends email, you should set up SPF records and domain keys and so on so that any fake emails pretending to be from you will be seen as such, right? Because if a bank doesn't publish an SPF record, then the remote email systems have to assume that that address might be valid and can't block it. But if they publish an SPF record that says any email from our bank will always come from this set of IP addresses, then remote email systems can automatically reject any email that isn't.
Right.
And the same thing with domain keys. Although, because so much of it is opt-in, it's still a bit iffy. So maybe what we could do is some kind of like a DNS whitelist. Like we've seen DNS blacklists before, and there's a couple whitelists where certain companies can get on a list and, it says if the email is from this domain and it matches this criteria, then it's legitimate, and it gives it basically a negative spam score to make up for any other spam score it might have.
Yeah.
Something like that, but basically says if the domain is on our list here it will always have a domain key signature in every email. So if you get an email that doesn't have a domain key signature from this domain, it's fake. Like I'm not 100% familiar with the way DKIM works. Like I know when you see a signature, you then call up the domain with the certain record and get the information about the domain key and check the signature. But I don't think there's a way. Normally, your email clients don't check for domain key signature on every email that doesn't have a signature, right? So some way, basically an equivalent to the HSTS that we talked about, right? There's a list of websites that will always be HTTPS no matter what.
Yeah.
Something like that will say these emails will always be signed no matter what.
Right.
But that requires support from your various mail vendors, whether that's, Postfix and Exim, SendMail, and so on.
And email providers.
And email providers like Gmail and Hotmail and so on.
Yeah, exactly.
And but rather than just having some, whitelist that negotiated between Hotmail, Gmail, and Yahoo or whatever, I would like to see some kind of more standard approach saying, basically something like HSTS for email. And, this story falls at a particularly important time because at Scale Engine, we've just moved to make sure that all of our emails are signed with DKIM, and as well our new support system. GPG signs all outgoing emails from a key for our support desk so that you can tell that they're actually from our real support desk.
Uh-huh. And you guys just
it wasn't that hard
that.
to set up, right? It wasn't that hard to set up. And so
you're just saying. You're just saying.
You should definitely be doing that.
Exactly.
It's like,
yeah.
My business partners specialize in this stuff because if you're a larger company or whatever and you're sending out a lot of email to people, like a newsletter or something, you need to have all these things set up or your email won't get through.
Right.
But banks need to do it. And like we saw with the previous story about weak DKIM keys, some places like PayPal were only using like 768-bit keys, and they should be using much stronger keys because they're a financial institution. So people will spend a month trying to factor that key, spend the money to have a month worth of a giant Amazon cluster trying to factor that key. Because if you get that key, you could make a lot of money. Right? Because all of a sudden you could send spoofed emails from PayPal that show up as being legitimate.
Yeah.
Even through DKIM and, people that will actually bother to check that stuff, even technically sophisticated users.
Yeah,
be fooled by that because of that.
Yeah, for sure. Not that we would ever take advantage of something like that. I think it's actually on your face. I think it might be actually on your face. There's a little dot. That's what if you're looking at what the chat room's talking about, they're talking about a dot on your face. It's not a big deal. You were reading the chat room. It's all right. It's okay, Alan. Now, any other thoughts? Actually,
not really. I just have a link to Threatpost has some additional coverage on the story if you want.
You know what you could have done is you could have waited because I was about to go talk about GoDaddy. I was going to take you off camera anyways. I love it. All right, chat room. You see, chat room, we're watching you guys. We are watching you guys. All right, well, why don't we take a quick break here and say thank you to GoDaddy.com, the sponsor of the TechSNAP program, now going for a while. And fresh right here, I had to verify, is it still real? I got paper in my hands, folks, because we have a crazy deal this week from GoDaddy. It is actually, it's going to go to the end of December. It's going to go to the end of December, but I'm always thinking in terms of holiday gifts. Look, GoDaddy's got a great deal. It's Tech $2.95 when you check out, and you get a .com for $2.95. $2.95 when you use the code Tech $2.95 when you check out. Of course, you can get up to 3 domains at $2.95. And then an additional .com would just be $7.99. And one thing I thought I'd mention, because one way you could use this if you want to help support our show, and you can support our show by visiting those links in our show notes and using these codes like Tech295 when you check out a GoDaddy. And while I had an idea, one thing you might want to consider doing is taking advantage of the recently upgraded GoDaddy website builder. They just revamped it, and if you've got a family member or a friend that maybe wants you to put together a website for them, because, hey, aren't you a computer guy? Look, I need a website. Maybe you could help me with my website. Have you gotten one of those people to approach you? I know. I go to get my hair cut, and the hairstylist person says, I got a question about my website. So you know what I tell them? I tell them go to GoDaddy.com, use the code Tech295 when you check out, and check out the website builder. It is brand freaking revamped, and it is really cool. And you can put some cool stuff together. Right now, GoDaddy has an example of a pizza place that used the GoDaddy website builder to put together their site. And it's actually a really great site. So check that out. GoDaddy, thank you for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Use our code TECH295 to get a .com for $2.95. Now, also, I'd like to remind the TechSNAP crowd, because I know you guys are security heads, and this also expires at the end of December. We have the code 499SSL2. 499 SSL2 will get you an SSL cert for $4.99. And that's a really great deal as well. Now, I don't know if you can use both codes at the same time, so keep that in mind. But definitely worth something to check out. And thank you to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. All right, Alan, should we... I should mention, folks can join the TechSNAP show live. Oh, go ahead. Oh, you had a story.
I just used the GoDaddy code to pick up a couple domains. Because, for $2.95, why not?
Yeah, I know, right? I did too.
The one name I wanted was taken, and I was like, well, I could get .net, and then it's like, oh, but that doesn't apply to the coupon code. It's like, I will get a slightly different .com instead.
There you go.
I could get like 3 instead of 1, so. Yeah,
I had a crazy idea. I'm not even going to tell people what it is yet, because it might not turn into anything. I don't want to get people's hopes up, but I'm like, if I ever do decide to do this, I want to have the .com for it. So that's what I used it for, so. Anyways, I was going to mention that TechSNAP is live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, and over at jblive.tv for the video and jblive.info for the audio. And you can join our live chat room and distract Alan as he goes, or tell him about the dot on his face if you like, or tell me that I'm breathing into the microphone. Actually, people don't say that. But you could if I was, and that's where you would do it. And then I would stop doing it in the show, and I would stop ruining your show, like I'm doing right now. All right, Alan, should we move right on to the next news story?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this next story here makes me freak out a little bit because, of course, I'm an old... I almost said a really bad word. I'm an old codger who does not like technology in my TVs. So this is giving me ammo, right? Something to be grumpy about.
Right. Whereas my parents have one of these Samsung Smart TVs, and I like it because when I'm over there or whatever, I can just plug a USB stick with some videos into the side of it and watch them, instead of having to try to, finagle a computer to hook it up to it or something.
I can see that. I can see that.
Like, the TV has Netflix built into it.
Yeah.
So you just authorize the device, and you can watch Netflix on the TV without having to have an Xbox or a PlayStation or a
my main, I don't mean to stick on this, but my main issue is, what's that experience going to be like in 5 to 7 years down the road?
Right.
Is that going to be balls still, or will they keep updating it?
Who knows?
Yeah.
And from the security's perspective, they have to keep patching this thing, or
they better, right?
A vulnerability.
I mean, a lot of these things are like running Linux.
You can see at their point of view is that, or regular customers, if your TV has to like reboot for 10 minutes to install an update every time you'd want to turn the damn thing on, you're going to be upset with it as well.
Yeah.
Right. So they have to find a way to do this that's not going to annoy the customers as well.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. So Luigi Amorelia or something. Sorry, that last name is just not going to happen.
That's Luigi Mario.
No, it's Arima or something
Mario.
Like that.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
A researcher from Malta who works at a security firm called Revol, which is kind of like VuPen. They find zero-day exploits and then sell them. He's developed a number of zero-day exploits against the Samsung Smart TVs. This all started with a previous problem he found with the smart TVs that we talked about back then, where he was just goofing around to annoy his brother who had one of these smart TVs, and he ended up stumbling on a bunch of things that allowed him to then
I love it.
Build on that and now build an exploit pack that he's trying to sell. But he's apparently found some signatures that will allow him to scan a network and find any of the IPs that belong to a smart TV device.
Ugh.
So basically some way that you can basically nmap a network and find out which devices are smart TVs.
Nice.
Because they have some signature that's specific to smart TVs.
Well, they're probably broadcasting a bunch of like available services and whatnot.
Or, they just have a certain port open and answer a certain version string. Hit them over.
Right.
The exploit allows him to remotely image all of the storage devices on the TV. So basically, he can copy the hard drive off the TV, but also, if you have a USB stick plugged into the side, it can copy the contents of that over the network. So there's a little video on the page here where you see him. He plugs in a USB stick into the side, and it's got a little like personal document and a private photos folder and a bunch of other stuff, and like the Gundam song. And all that, and he basically copies those to his computer as an image, mounts it as a virtual drive, and opens up this drive, and he's got a copy of everything that was on this USB stick that's plugged into the TV. But the exploit could also allow an attacker to install custom firmware on the TV which would make it stop updating and basically give the attacker root access to the TV and do whatever they want. Install malicious applications, or they can also simulate the remote control. Basically, the TVs have a feature where you could control them from your smartphone or something instead of using the remote.
Right.
And with that, you basically have all the features you would have, all the commands you could send from the physical remote.
Sure.
So it allows them to basically browse the app market and run a malicious app, which would then allow him basically to root the TV. So even if there's no remote exploit that could happen, he can then cause code execution by simulating the user with the remote control, clicking on the, finding the app in the App Store and running it. Also could operate any of the microphones or cameras connected to the TV. So if, somebody's got this set up to do video conferencing or something, the attacker could turn on the camera and record video from it and copy that back or whatever. So they could literally spy on people with that, right? With the microphone and camera.
You know what?
They could steal credentials stored on the TV, right? So if you're, if you have your TV set up with your Twitter account or something, they could steal the username and password or the OAuth token for that.
I wonder if these TVs go through any kind of security audit before they ship. I suppose there's any process that these electronics manufacturers are even cognizant of?
But some of them probably do something, but some of them probably don't.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's more of a, push it out there and we'll fix it if we have to.
Right.
But also other things they could do was overwrite the root certificate store. So basically install their own root certificates so that SSL certificates that they sign would appear as valid, which would allow them to do a man-in-the-middle attack and say, intercept any traffic that the user is trying to go to. So if you're on your phone and you're going to some secure site, I don't know, people try to do banking on their phone or something, because you've installed these fake SSL certificates, you can now man-in-the-middle attack that and intercept all the traffic to the bank unencrypted. Also, it could keep a log of all the content played on the TV, right? If you're playing stuff off the USB stick, it could keep track of what you've played off the USB stick. Right? So if people are, say, putting pirated movies on a USB stick and watching them on their TV, the attacker could then use that just to blackmail the people, right? Pretend to be the movie industry and say, if you don't pay us $500, we'll sue you or whatever. There's a huge list of things that they could do with that. But with the remote control thing, they could basically have the same level of access that you have to the TV standing in front of it, but remotely. Although he didn't give any technical details about how the vulnerability works or how he did it, because he's trying to sell the vulnerability rather than being a responsible researcher and telling Samsung about it.
I wouldn't be surprised if the practical outcome is this is like a little modding community for the Samsung TV. Maybe we'll see like XBMC ports, custom ROMs, for your TV.
Although there's an app market there, and people are doing interesting things with it. A couple of Scale Engine customers are actually developing custom Samsung Smart TV apps for different things.
Really?
There's a whole market there where you can charge for the apps or have subscriptions.
It'd be cool to have a Jupiter Broadcasting app, right, where people could watch the live stream.
I don't know what it takes to develop for that, but I think it's mostly HTML5 based. I don't actually know, but it's something we could look into. The other thing is, if the TV is connected to the internet behind a NAT router or firewall or something, such that you can't directly connect to it from the internet, then it's less vulnerable because people can't. If the TV is not directly exposed to the internet, someone remote can't scan it. However, you still have to consider other attack vectors, like, your TV. A lot of these TVs are connected via Wi-Fi rather than an Ethernet cable, or even if it's an Ethernet cable, they're on a network that has Wi-Fi as well. That means that if someone was able to crack your Wi-Fi and gain access to your Wi-Fi network, then, or if your Wi-Fi network's open or whatever, then they could scan your TV. So, they could go war driving past your house and take over your TV.
Yeah. That'd be funny.
And your neighbor is to just keep turning his TV off every once in a while or something, right?
or hack it to turn it the F down if you live in an apartment.
Yes, exactly. Yes, turn the TV down. Or, change the channel on him when he's trying to watch something.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever. But yeah, you still have to consider that someone could access it via your LAN or the Wi-Fi or whatever. Another example in the article was, smart TVs that are connected in offices, especially since those might have more proprietary things connected via the USB port, right? If you have one of these smart TVs in a meeting room so that somebody can just plug a USB stick into it and play a presentation or a video on it.
Right.
For a meeting or whatever. Well, maybe that video's, proprietary information or something that you don't want publicly disclosed just yet. And someone could steal that way. Another example that I thought up was, we're likely to see these smart TVs in like bars and cafes and hotels and stuff. Right? Like the hotel I stayed at in Warsaw had a Microsoft Surface thing set up and an Xbox with the motion detection and stuff. So, seeing a smart TV in a place like that is awfully likely as well. And so, if you think a bar that has one of these Samsung smart TVs and then they have Wi-Fi for their customers, then all of a sudden I'm on the same network as the TV. I can then hack the TV and do stuff to it.
I kind of want one now.
Yeah.
Now I can actually, this story, I went from not wanting one to now I want one to hack on it. That sounds fun.
Of course, we don't have any details on how to actually do this yet because this guy's trying to make money off of it.
Oh, well.
Disclosing the information.
Somebody else will figure it out.
But exactly, yes. And now that we know it's there, there's a group of people that are just like, yes, what can I do with my
Right. We had Shane Kufel and a couple others in the chat room confirm, it's mostly JavaScript, HTML5 type stuff for the apps on the Samsung smart TVs. Anybody ever want to make us a live app?
So that's the same as the iPhone.
So if anybody ever wanted to make us an app and pointed at our HLS stream, it would probably work on there.
Yep.
That would be awesome. Well, that would be cool.
We do have Scale Engine customers using our HLS stream, so on an iPhone and a Roku and so on. So.
Right.
And yeah, it's the same as the Roku.
Right. We have it on the Roku and it's working, yeah. Yep. All right. Well, any other thoughts on that story, Alan?
Not that one, no.
Should we move on to this GPS story that, according to the headline, researchers have found crippling flaws in GPS. Is this legit?
Possibly.
Crippling?
Partly. Well, they're not necessarily attacking the satellites or anything,
right.
But it's mostly exploiting the receivers.
Okay.
But basically, some researchers at Carnegie Mellon University have put together a machine that costs about $2,500 that is able to disrupt both consumer and professional-grade GPS receivers.
Oh, good.
But also to target the continuously operating reference stations, or cores. Basically, they can send a specially crafted GPS message that could bring down parts of the GPS network. Or, just directly spoof all the devices that are receiving that signal stronger than the legit signal. And so basically it talks about different parts of the GPS network and infrastructure that they could take down, including parts from NOAA and from more international version of the same thing. But the attacks were conducted against 7 different receiver brands, including Magellan, Garmin, GlobalSat, uBlocks, LocoSys, and iFly 700. And then another manufacturer, Trimble, is actually working with the researchers to push out a patch to fix their products. The new attacks are quite different than most of the existing GPS spoofing attacks that we've seen, which mostly focus on just playing with the signal and so on. The new research covers a much larger attack vector because they looked at GPS as if it was a computer system, because it mostly is. So the attack includes analysis of the GPS protocol and the operating systems and the whole GPS software stack and how they could attack it that way. So actually attacking them as computers rather than attacking the GPS system itself by just sending out false signals or whatever. They're talking about exploiting the software on the receivers and so on, and specially crafted GPS messages. One of the interesting attacks was the fact that a lot of devices use GPS as their source of time, of their clock synchronization.
Oh, sure, yeah. Because
GPS is considered a good source of legit time. So by messing with the signal, the attackers were able to, say, trigger the Unix epoch rollover, right? To, the 2038 bug.
Yeah.
So basically to trigger that to roll over, right? By saying, hey, it's 5 seconds before that, and then the clock rolls over, and, maybe the GPS device crashes or something. Now, if you do that on a GPS device that's doing something important, like steering a
boat,
drone, or a boat, drone, or an oil tanker, or whatever,
or a taco,
or a SCADA system that's using it for time, and it has certain things that happen at certain times, then you could make those things not happen anymore by resetting the clock to 1970 or whatever, or 1901, or whatever. Otherwise you could crash the device or otherwise tamper with it or make it do silly things or whatever.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So I didn't have time to go over all of it, but the full research paper is linked in the show notes, and if you're interested, you can find out all about it.
Including information on the box that they built with some pictures and some diagrams of how it works and all that kind of stuff. Really good research paper.
Yeah.
It is a
from
PDF,
university,
though.
so
Yeah.
well, almost all research papers are.
I know, but I want to warn the folks. I don't, every now and then somebody clicks a PDF and then just smacks Adobe Acrobat Reader in their face. What the hell is this? Where am I?
I have a Firefox plugin that makes sure that never happens.
Well, I don't run Windows, so I don't actually run it.
I also don't have Adobe installed on my system, so that doesn't happen. I use an alternate GPS reader,
Foxit? You use
PDF.
Foxit?
Yes.
Yeah, I like Foxit.
Yes, but I also have a plugin that makes sure that it always downloads it because I would like to have a copy of it anyway.
Another neat thing you can do is there's like an extension to open them in Google Docs. And if you want to, that might be crazy though.
I think my plugin, one of the buttons is that. I've just never used it because I usually just want to download it and open it.
Burn it. Oh, right. Any other thoughts on that one, Alan?
Nope.
Okay.
We're good to go.
Well, then, before we jump into the feedback, I want to remind folks, as it is the shopping season, to support the TechSNAP program. If you find this show valuable, over there, we got links at the bottom of JupiterBroadcasting.com. JupiterBroadcasting.com is our website. And at the bottom of that website, we have links down to our affiliate links for Amazon, eBay, Netflix, Newegg, ThinkGeek, Best Buy, Audible.
ThinkGeek, especially, ThinkGeek has free shipping in the USA until the end of tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh, really?
Shipping.
Oh,
Yes.
that's right. That is right.
The reason that the sale ends tomorrow is because the cheap shipping wouldn't arrive in time for Christmas if you order any later than tomorrow.
And you wouldn't want to pay shipping on the Wesley Crusher bowling shirt, but if they have free shipping, actually, that would be really funny. That would be a really great shirt for me to wear on air, actually. So I love ThinkGeek. Yeah, I mean, if you want to shop there and you want a portion of your shopping session to be contributed to Jupiter Broadcasting, you click that affiliate link right there before you do that, or you can lock in some direct funding. And this is great for anyone who really finds these shows valuable and has a little stake in the game and wants us to keep going. This would be a great way to contribute. And don't forget we have the donor recognition wall down here, just like Mr. Shoutcast servers. Just a little comment on there right there. Says long live Jupiter Broadcasting over at servers.internet-radio.com/shoutcast. And he has little Shoutcast servers over in the UK, I believe. Cool. And he donated a couple of bucks every month. I don't know if he wants me to say how much, but it was generous. It was nice. So thank you, everybody who supports this show and supports the network by going to jupiterbroadcasting.com/donate or using our affiliate links before you shop. But Alan, with the news all done and the plugging all done and all that stuff, that must mean it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of our website or starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. All right, Alan, we got a few things to get through this week. Are you ready for our first question? This one's urgent, and it comes from the Mumble King in the chat room. Now, he tried to get me to answer this for him, and I looked at it and I thought, I got to talk to Alan before I can answer this. He says, first off, he wants to go on record saying Jupiter Broadcasting rocks, and I really enjoy all the shows on a daily basis. I recently had a client come to me with an unusual request that I'm hoping the legendary host of TechSNAP can help me find the right solutions for. Here goes. My client has a business that requires them to post ads across the internet on multiple websites. They have expressed desire that they would like to start posting their ads on Craigslist to help extend their employee base. The problem is that Craigslist is geared towards localized posting solutions, and they place roadblocks in the way for legitimate business to post their ads on a national basis in multiple cities across the USA. To bypass these roadblocks, I have access to a network of Debbie and VPS in several ideal locations. Each VPS comes action-packed with their own pool of dedicated IP addresses, and I'm planning to utilize Firefox with Ubuntu 12.10 in a VM to connect to a single VPS and tunnel all web browser traffic through it, so that it may appear as though the client is posting from where the VPS is located in that part of the country. The problem is, I'm not entirely sure how to accomplish this goal, or which internet traffic tunneling solutions are right for the client in the situation. Attached to this email is a mind map I created in FreeMind, which I don't have out here, which will help visualize and represent in greater detail. Although I think we got it. He says, thank you, the Mumble King. Sounds like a challenge. So he's trying to get around.
Yes, a little bit like spam posting. But,
yeah, that's what I was wondering.
It's like Craigslist doesn't want you to post your ad in 50 different sections. But OpenVPN is the easiest answer.
Yeah, if you're just going to do it from one machine, OpenVPN. I would say so, right?
And then you basically, OpenVPN gets the traffic from the Firefox machine to the end machine.
What about just Squid, if you're just doing web posting?
There's Tiny Proxy, which is like Squid, but much lighter weight.
Yeah.
And you can set the bind IPs. So yeah, you say, listen on this host name, or on this IP address, on this port, and tunnel out using this address. And then you can either just rotate those, or you can configure a bunch of different copies of Tiny Proxy, saying, all right, on this port, all traffic goes out this IP, on this port, this IP, this port, this IP, and so on. And then all you need is to change the settings on your Firefox. So basically click through those different ports and different VPSs to get your different external IP addresses.
Right. There you go. That's probably the best way.
Yeah, if you're just trying to make your web browser appear as all these different IP addresses.
I would think it'd be more tricky to get VPSs in all of the right cities, but I guess if you do enough digging around...
It probably doesn't have to be that specific. They just need lots of different IP addresses so that Craigslist doesn't see the pattern.
Right. All right.
Although in general, I think it's a bad idea to do what they're doing. But anyway.
Yeah, and I say screw Craigslist. If they don't want the business, then don't give it to them. Take it somewhere else. There's other people that want your business. There's other people out there. All right, Alan, next email comes in from Simon. He has a few questions about NGINX. Now, when he says a few questions, what he means is he wrote the Gettysburg's address in an email, sent it into the show, and then wanted us to read the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is pull out, I tried to pre-read it. So it starts off with his journey as a junior systems engineer at a web shop company in the Netherlands, and he has 4 dedicated web servers, all running Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6. Recently migrated from Apache to NGINX, and you'll go into more details here in a little bit. He ran into SE Linux problems, actually, with some of this, and he actually was kind of going back to our conversation we had recently. However, he says they've created themselves a bit of a problem. So their so-called web platform consists of 4 web servers and 2 database servers. Until a few months ago, it was all running smoothly with no problems whatsoever. However, recently their company was in the news in a positive way, so it generated a lot of sales. The web servers didn't take to it as well. All the other servers could handle the load just fine, but the web servers almost fried, so we needed to handle it quick. Somewhere, someone started to migrate the web servers from Apache to NGINX. This should solve the problem, and it indeed solved the web server problem. We could now handle the same load on 2 web servers easily, so it was a big win for NGINX. However, we created a new problem. Our CDN started to get very high loads. It appears we now move the problem over toward our CDN. Because it's a relatively static site, we enabled caching on the load balancers to check out if that would work, and it did. With 256 megabytes of caching, we created a 20% decrease of load on our CDN. So now caching seems to be the right solution. But here's the wonder.
What kind of CDN are they using where caching on their side would affect the CDN? But also, what kind of CDN are you using that can't scale?
Well, that's a good
you need
question.
a scale engine CDN, obviously.
They have a few questions about NGINX, Alan. Like, how can they? Because now that what they've done is they're transitioning over to using NGINX as a reverse proxy, and this is really saving them a huge amount of bandwidth. But the question is how can they find statistics like how many hits a specific file in the cache gets, and how old the average data is, and on how much data is already served from the CDN by caching? And most practical question of all. How do I get one single item out of the cache quickly without dirty search scripts, all in case a web developer releases something too early? You know it's going to happen.
There's a couple things. If you want those kind of statistics, I'd recommend using Varnish as the reverse proxy instead of NGINX.
He was wondering that, yeah.
Because Varnish gives you all those statistics via the Varnish stat thing. And I've actually wrote my own script that parses the Varnish stat XML output and feeds it into Nagios so that my Nagios graph will graph things like the cache hit ratio, the requests per second, the connections per second, and all that. So I have nice graphs of that information. Sadly, NGINX doesn't give you that. If you're using the NGINX proxy cache setup, the file name of the thing in the cache is predictable because it's the MD5 hash of whatever your proxy key is, which by default is the full URL, right? So on mine it's a little different because we include certain headers in the thing, but it's literally just the MD5 hash of my headers and then the full URL. Okay. Remember that it doesn't have the return character at the end. So when you're calculating the MD5, you have to make sure you don't include that. But yeah, so if I want to know what the file name is of a cache object for a certain URL, I just put the headers I know it's going to have, and then the URL, pipe that into MD5, except for echoing it with -n, so it doesn't have the /n at the end, and I get the MD5. And then the way the directory structure works, like if you have, instead of having all of these cache files in one big directory, it breaks them down into directories based on the hex code, right? So like if you have levels set to 2, it'll create directories 00, 01, 02 up to FF, and then divide the files up into those. It does that, except for it bases it from the end, right? So if the MD5 hash is this long or whatever, it's the last 2 characters that affect what the directory name is going to be. And if you have multiple levels, it's the last 2, and then the next to last 2, and the next to last 2, and so on. So from that, you can predict what the cache file's name is going to be in the cache. And then you can manually
go kill it.
But yeah, walking the cache, there's no good way to do that. In Varnish, it's just entirely not allowed. And because the locking would cause problems. And in Nginx, crawling through that mess of directories is hard. It's faster on ZFS than on any other file system because of the metadata caching.
I bet, yeah.
But even then, it's not a fun thing to do. So being able to, knowing the fact that the file name, the path and the file name are predictable from the MD5 hash of the URL or whatever you set proxy_key to, or proxy cache key to, then you can predict what the file name is going to be.
Very nice.
But there's also a purge module that you can get for Nginx, where basically you can go to a certain, if you, instead of doing an HTTP get, if you do an HTTP purge on that URL, you can have Nginx delete it from its cache.
Simon also mentions that TechSNAP's one of his favorite shows and that you inspired him to start on a home FreeBSD/ZFS project.
Nice.
How about that?
But generally, it sounds like if his homeworld CDN, he should consider a real CDN. Or the CDN he has is bad if they're having trouble scaling.
Yeah, I knew you were going to. So
that's the whole point.
And one of his questions
CDN,
is like...
takes the worry of making it scale away from you.
Sounds like one of his questions regarding how can we tell, the cache stats. If the CDN's doing that, they have to provide you with that data.
Right.
Unless...
but yeah, he's talking, I think, about he has like a APC or Memcache cache on his end in his app. And then, so he knows that, but he doesn't know the cache hit ratio for Nginx, and there's really no way to tell that I know of.
Okay.
I have some debugging stuff in the headers in my Varnish. So Varnish returns as part of the response for when you request, say, the CSS file for the Jupiter Broadcasting website, one of the headers will be a little one that says X scale engine uses, and it will say how many times that has been cache hit. So this file has been loaded 10,000 times from the latest cache update of it. And then it also keeps track of the date when it was originally cached and how old it is and how long it will be before we throw it out and so on and so on.
Very nice. Are you ready for the next one, sir?
Yes.
This one comes from David, and I think he's making a few logical leaps, but bear with him here. He says, hi, guys. I was just listening to TechSNAP 86, and it made me think of something. Since Windows 8 passwords by default use Windows Live accounts instead of storing the passwords physically on the computer, wouldn't it be possible to use the emailed picture that changes your DNS server exploit to return that password even as valid even when it's not?
Return which password?
Well, so what he's saying is...
he's saying doing some kind of man-in-the-middle attack against Windows Live?
Right.
Well, Windows Live probably has HTTPS or something, but also... they probably do some kind of cryptographic signature or something on it.
Yeah. So they would be, the client, the Windows 8 client would say, that's not a valid server response, and they wouldn't even take, Yeah,
so basically, Microsoft probably has the SSL certificate for that hard-coded, so you can't do a man-in-the-middle attack on it.
Microsoft's pretty smart about that stuff. And the other thing is that it does also cache it locally. It's not just stored in live.
Yes, it's cached locally so that when you're not connected to the internet, you can still log into the computer.
Right.
Now, the cache locally one, there may be some potential for you to modify that, but again, it's probably signed by something so that they can verify it hasn't been modified. Because otherwise, you could, say, change that hash to be a known hash so that you could log in.
I don't think,
again,
David's...
I'd have to know more about how it actually works, but I'm pretty sure they have that locked down fairly
You know,
well.
I mean, I think Dave is on the right path, though. It is a pretty big change for how Windows 8 security logins work.
It's optional. I don't have it. On my Windows 8 laptop, I was like, no, thank you. I want to just have a regular password.
Absolutely. But like probably a lot of the machines...
I don't have a Windows Live account, and I never plan to.
Probably a lot of the machines that people just buy will probably take advantage of it, I would guess, because Microsoft probably has the OEM set it up that way. Either way, but...
Mine's the OEM one. It's, when you first boot it up and you create the account,
gives you the choice.
It gives you the
I've
choice.
always seen it that way, too. You
Live
just get
is
the
the
option.
default, but...
Right, yeah. But you can change it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, it's still something to be to think of. It's still an interesting change. All right, Alan. Well, the next one's just kind of a FYI for folks who are fascinated by RSA and the encryption and all the stuff, the topics we've brought up on the show. He says, this is from Pico. He says, hello, I found this rather nice YouTube video about RSA encryption and felt like sharing it with you. Perhaps it's nice to pass around to non-experts. And he gives us the link. He says, also, Merry Christmas. So there you go. If you folks want to watch a little video about RSA and what it's a presentation that somebody's giving, you can follow up a link with that.
Is that like the asymmetric encryption stuff?
I didn't watch it, Alan. I looked it up.
Oh,
I went,
okay.
well, the reason why I didn't watch it is I didn't see it until before the show.
is mostly what SSL certificates are based on, what SSH keys are based on, and a bunch of other things.
Right.
So I'm sure you've heard of it before, so yes, that video might be interesting. I might even check it out just to see what it is.
Now, Alan, before we get out of the feedback segment, I wanted to say happy birthday to Chris Edel, who turns 18, and his lady friend sent in a note to the TechSNAP program a while back ago, wanted to give us a shout-out. He turns 18, I believe, on Saturday. So, we wanted to fit it into this show. It's coming up really soon, and so happy birthday to him, and hello to his girlfriend, Angela, and hopefully he has a great...
Chris and Angela, eh?
Yeah, Chris and Angela. And Chris and Angela were together when I turned 18, too. This Chris and Angela. So maybe, of course, she said it in so long ago, they might be separated now for all I know. You're 18, man. Sometimes that stuff lasts forever. Sometimes that stuff lasts for a couple of weeks. But happy birthday to you, Chris, and hope you have a great 18th birthday. Now, folks, if you want to get an email into the show, you can do so, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or like I always say, pop that contact link at the top of the website and then choose TechSNAP from the drop-down, or even better, start I need to go there and I need to check for that. I didn't check today, but there are usually some really great threads going in our techsnap.reddit.com or techsnap.links.tv, whatever you prefer. You go in there, you start a thread, and then people in there can comment, and you can often get your question answered before it even makes it in the show, and then we also take everybody's comments and incorporate into our version of the feedback when we cover it. But Alan, that's all the feedback for this week, so that must mean it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. And welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite make it to the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them, maybe give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. And a lot of these links are provided by our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Alan, this first story was provided by our subreddit, and it caught my attention. I thought we'd cover it on the show. Are you ready?
Yep.
Now, I'll be fair, I didn't get a chance to read all of this. Did you get a chance to read this one very, very thoroughly? Okay, well, here's what I gleaned from it. The BBC has titled it The Hum That Helps Fight Crime. And the backstory is a little sad. It's actually about a gal who taped a rapist confession. But they needed to be able to pinpoint the time and when the recording was made in order to get a conviction. And and sound engineers were able to thumbprint the hum of the electrical noise in the background and match it up with when the electrical grid would have been making that hum to verify that that's when the recording was placed. That's the gist that I got from the article.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think that would be possible.
Yeah, it's, I guess,
I would have thought the hum was mostly random noise. Almost.
Well, so that's what I would have thought. But they say when you take into account that that actually the electrical grid has a unique pattern of frequencies at any given time. And that if you have a recording of those frequencies and then you match them up with another recording and they match up, you have a pretty good idea of when the recording was made. Pretty interesting.
But isn't it possible that for 2 10-minute periods that aren't the same, they might be the same hum?
I guess you would think, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Well, folks, if you want to find out,
if you want to know, read the story because we didn't.
That's why we put it in the roundup.
Yeah.
All right, Al. Now this next story is.
So Intel has launched a new line of Atom SoCs, which is system on a chip.
Right.
So basically it's the CPU soldered in and so on. They're dual core between 1.6 and 2 gigahertz with hyper-threading. So in total you would get 4 threads.
That's not bad.
Looks like 4 cores. In packs of 100, the system on a chip is $54 for the cheapest one. The higher end ones also support ECC RAM, which is server specific.
So they're targeting
something
server.
Atoms haven't had before.
Yeah.
Although I don't know how much more expensive that makes it. The other thing was the density. They can easily do 1,000 cores in a rack. Although some vendors have managed to get that number much higher already.
So we're going to start seeing data centers offer these as a type of tier, aren't we?
Right. So what their proposal was, when a data center needs a lot of little web servers, as opposed to a bunch of
big servers that have a bunch of
Xeons, like my latest servers is dual Xeons with 6 cores each with hyper-threading, like 24 total cores, and they're all big, beefy, ready to go. Whereas the Atoms are designed more for, you need a lot of little things and you want them separate for whatever reason. Right. If you're going to rent out each of these nodes separately, then they work. Interesting things are that they do support virtualization. So you can run like Zen or VirtualBox or whatever on them.
Getting real. This is getting real in here. 8 gigs of RAM.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is that they're limited to 8 gigabytes of RAM.
That's not bad for
That's not bad for individual systems. For my setup where I need a lot of RAM and not a lot of CPU, it would have been better if they supported more RAM.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Go up to 32 in one of these things. If you don't need a ton of CPU, you just need memory.
Yeah. They talked about they could be useful for low demand file servers, right? If you just need if you're doing like archival storage where you don't necessarily need huge performance, you just need to be able to drive a bunch of disks. These could be also very popular for that.
Great for a home server.
Yep.
Well, it'll be interesting if in a couple of years, when you're shopping at GoDaddy, maybe they'll just have like a low-powered.
A lot of the places where I rent servers now, you can get an Atom-based 1U little server for cheaper than anything else. Although I usually don't because they don't ever have enough RAM for what I want.
Right. Well, you hardcore, Alan.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about this next story. What do you say?
But the virtualization thing was interesting because I'm pretty sure most of the other Atoms didn't support that.
No, that's
cool. I don't know if they have like what subset of features they have for virtualization because Intel has like VTX, VTD, and a bunch of other ones. I'd be interested to know what level of virtualization support they have as far as like, do they have extended page tables, which is the requirement to run the new BSD hypervisor.
I would think they would. Well, yeah, I guess it'd be hard to know. We'd have to find out.
I imagine arc.intel.com will maybe say someday.
All right, Alan. Check this out. This story caught my attention. It was over on the Register. Ghost Shell hackers released 1.6 million NASA, FBI, and ESA accounts, and says they for those two factors we have prepared a juicy release of 1.6 million accounts / records from fields such as aerospace, nanotechnology, banking, law, education, government, military, and all kinds of wacky companies and corporations working with the Department of Defense, airlines, and more.
So what are the records?
Yeah,
are
accounts.
They just rows from tables that
right. Well, with accounts and things like that. Okay. Yeah. They got database rows they're going to be releasing, and this. Do you remember here? Ghost Shell rings a bell. This is the group. Ghost Shell has announced it's finished its operations for the year. It's done. It's all done. But it's signing off with this 1.6 million dump. So this is sort of like their "Have a great year, everybody. 2012 is great. See you next year." And then they just drop this 1.6 million account bomb.
All right. I'll have to look into that more and see what was there because I've seen similar dumps like this that were just every SQL table they could dump and most of them
it's not as valuable. Right. I figured I'd toss in the roundup that puts it on the TechSNAP radar, and then if we promote it up to a big story later on, so be it. Yep. All right. This next one comes from the mailing list from you, Alan.
So we talked about a bunch of MySQL vulnerabilities last week. The same researchers published some more. This particular one is faster online password cracking. Normally, if you're trying to brute force a password against a MySQL server, you have to connect, try to log in with that username, and it fails or whatever, and then you end up getting disconnected after a couple of attempts and have to reconnect, and that really slows it down. So we found that if you connect as a regular user, just like an unprivileged user, just any regular user, you can then use the change user command to attempt other usernames and passwords at a rate of up to like 5,000 per second over the network, and even more over localhost. So, for example, if you have access to a shared MySQL server for web hosting, then you could use your credentials to attempt to compromise other credentials for other sites hosted by the same server at a high rate of speed. In his example, his tiny little Perl script does the attempts, and literally he just runs John the Ripper to generate the passwords, pipes that into his Perl script, which then connects to the MySQL server and does it. He says it's not really a new vulnerability or anything. It's probably just a documentation issue with MySQL saying, that their security guide should mention you should do this or that to prevent this from happening.
All right. There you go. Crazy MySQL is crazy.
Yep.
Eric Schmidt made some headlines yesterday, I believe it was. Yeah, it was yesterday. He says Google Fiber is a real business and plans to expand it in other markets. So we know,
Right,
I think
because right now it's only in like Kansas City or something.
Yeah, Kansas City, yeah. And it's crazy, right? It's crazy good speeds for a crazy price. It includes TV service.
Netflix just published their speed results, average download speed of users on like 15 or 20 different ISPs across the states. And, they found a bunch of interesting things like Verizon mobile users had 40% better speed than AT&T mobile users. But Google Fiber was the top average download speed.
Yeah, they
now,
said...
these are real speed tests, right? They're not telling, how fast the connection is. It's just users from this ISP, on average, use this many megabits or whatever. And it was mostly in like the 1 to 3 megabit range. But the people with Google Fiber and Verizon Fios had better results, but that may be partly because people that have Google Fiber or Verizon Fios more often choose the HD option in Netflix because they know that their connection can do it.
Webby Wizard in our chat room was saying that folks have opened up bed and breakfast in Kansas City where you just rent rooms with Google Fiber. If I was on a business trip, I as sure as hell would do that if I was in that area. Why wouldn't you do that? I could do the shows from there, right? I hope they do.
If you lived somewhere not that far away, you just go for a weekend of downloading.
I have Fios Fiber now, and I'm like, this is like the best internet I've ever had in my life. Yeah. I can only imagine the Google Fiber service is probably even better. Google, bring that stuff here. You get it up here, Google. Get it up here.
I'm happy with my 100 by 5, but I'd kill for more upstream.
Oh, yeah. All right, so everybody put on your freak out pants. You might need a change of pants because you're going to crap them after this next headline. Everybody needs to panic because the FreeBSD project could miss year-end funding target by nearly 50%. Freak out now.
Right. This is a story that mostly came popular with Slashdot and Hacker News posting that they noticed that basically the FreeBSD Foundation in the beginning near the beginning of December published their year-end fundraising letter, which they do every year.
Yeah.
And when you looked at their website at that time, they had only got to about 50% of the amount of funds they wanted to raise, right? They for 2012, they wanted to get to $500,000, which is a pretty big step up from last year, which I think was $400,000 or $450,000. And basically, Slashdot and Hacker News misinterpreted this as, the project was doing really poorly so far this year.
Doomed.
However, the FreeBSD Foundation posts and clarifies that they're usually at about 50% at this time of year every year, that almost all of their foundations all of their donations come after the fundraising letter they send out in the first week of December.
Right.
So almost all their funding for the year comes at the very end of the year every year anyway. As to highlight that fact, in the 3 days after the foundation posted their fundraising letter, they got 650 new donations totaling $43,000.
Oh, wow.
Including a $1,000 donation from Scale Engine.
Aw, Scale Engine powered by FreeBSD.
Exactly. That was actually the message we put on our thing. It's like Scale Engine is 100% powered by FreeBSD, and we also like the conferences. They sponsor developers who can't afford to go to these conferences, where I then get to meet them and tell them what I need them to do.
Right.
So it's very good that the FreeBSD Foundation does that, and we appreciate it. We met a lot of developers at EuroBSDCon and at MeetBSD, especially the guys at MeetBSD were there talking about Beehive. And it's like, I'm very interested in that, and I have some unique use cases, and I would very much like for them to add features I want. And so getting to talk to them for an hour about it
that's
was
huge
invaluable
access.
to me.
That's major access.
And, I would like more things like that to be possible. And so
not necessarily an impossibility in the commercial proprietary world of operating systems, but much more likely when you're dealing with an open source server operating system as your core infrastructure, you can actually talk to the guy who's just a guy who creates that component. And that's huge. That's a huge advantage, Alan. So I can totally understand that. All right. Now, well, congratulations. And if you're a FreeBSD user, you might want to consider contributing to the foundation. Obviously, they do awesome stuff. This next story will test...
they have a donor wall like
oh, good.
Jupiter Broadcasting does, so that you can see who's donated and so on.
That's cool. Which is where you put the scale engines powered by FreeBSD, right? There you go.
Yep.
Now, this next story will test your alliances. It will challenge your assumptions because Santa has transitioned from using Google Maps to using Bing Maps. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, NORAD actually has an official Santa tracker that tracks Santa.
Right. They've been doing that for 50 some odd years now.
Yeah, a long time.
But it's fairly new that there's so much internet side of it.
Right, and it'll do like a live overlay of Santa over Google Maps and stuff like that.
And so Google started doing it in 2007, and they've done it every year since. This year, basically, Microsoft offered to donate more money than Google was going to and said, you have to use our maps or we won't donate or whatever. And so Google and NORAD agreed to let Microsoft have the maps in exchange for the pile of money or whatever.
That's interesting. Well, I wouldn't think Santa would care so much about that, but I guess Santa's not so involved with NORAD. Yeah, it's more like...
It's NORAD that has to fund this operation.
So you can also they'll have smartphone and tablet apps available if you want to just track it.
And they have like a phone number you can call too. I think last year they got like 175,000 phone calls.
Hey, NORAD, where's Santa at?
A bunch of money.
What does it do when you call it? What is it?
I'm not 100% sure, but
kind of want to call it right now.
But
I'm totally fighting the temptation.
I don't think it starts for another week or two.
So if I called them right now, they wouldn't answer.
Probably. Okay. But if you call them on Christmas Eve, or, it'd be a fun thing to do with your kids. Probably what happens, right?
Yeah, well, I suppose. All right, so I'm not calling them right now, I promise.
Right.
Let's see here. Okay, it's 1-877. No, all right, fine, I'll call them later. All right, Alan, well, I think that brings us to the end of this week's show, doesn't it? Oh, and by the way, we'll link to the Santa tracker if you want to track Santa.
They also have random interesting Flash games on there.
Oh,
you have to connect all the lights to make solve the puzzle to make the Christmas tree light up and stuff.
Oh, good. Well, good. So that way I can spend more time on the Santa Tracker website. It sounds like something I get right on top of. All right, everyone. Well, look, if you want to join the TechSNAP program live in our handsome chat room, you see, we have all these people that join us live over jblive.tv and jblive.info, and they jump in our chat room, and they're incredibly good looking, and you will be too if you join us. And then you can tell us what you think of the show as we go, and we do that at Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC, and also Jupiter Broadcasting does not have any medicinal value.
No, we don't have any medicinal value. What
you're trying to say it would make you look better, and so I'm just saying.
Well, your results may vary. The actual claims have not been verified by the FDA, but your results may vary, and you may need to show up at least 3 or 4 times over and over again before it actually really makes a difference. But there you go. Otherwise, that's just what I've noticed. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the TechSNAP program, and we'll be right back here next week.